Hello, I'm W.T. Edmondson, and welcome to Focus. Freedom often causes unbelievable silence. Well, we have with us again Mayor Carrie Tergin, and we have a lot to talk about. The city has gone through a lot, and so, but first of all, before we get into that, tell us a little bit about your trips that you've taken recently.
Yes, in July, I was fortunate to visit our partner city of Münchberg, Germany for the first time, and a group of 6 of us went from Jefferson City to visit. We went there for their Wiesenfest, which is a festival they have. They have a children's parade, and they included us in the parade. We got to tap the keg of beer with the mayor of Münchberg. They call him the Bürgermeister, so I was the Bürgermeisterin, which means mayor in German. So Münchberg is our partner city. Mayor John Landwehr started the partnership years ago when he was mayor. And every few years we go there and they come back, and they were so happy to have us. And you know Old Munichburg here in Jefferson City? Well, people from Münchberg, Germany came to the Old Munichburg area generations ago, and it's interesting because they're still the same family names that you hear in Germany, and it was neat to have that culture and that connection to visit our partner city.
And you took another venture.
Yes, well, since we were already in Germany, we hopped on a plane, and about 2 hours later we were in Greece, and I have family in Greece. So both sides of my family, on my mom and dad's side, are Greek, and so this time we went to visit my mom's side of the family, and we went to Katerini, which is in northern Greece. And so when you look out of their back patio, you can see Mount Olympus, and they're about 10 minutes from the ocean. So they have the ocean and the beautiful mountains. We ate lots of Greek food, a lot of Greek desserts, fresh fish. It was incredible, but I'm very fortunate to have family over there. I have to go a little farther to see my family than a lot of people do, but I'm very blessed to get to visit them in Greece. And I speak a little Greek, so I can get by over there.
Well, you know, I tag into Facebook every once in a while, so I saw you having a good time.
Yes, it was wonderful.
Jefferson City was unfortunately the recipient of the tornado in May the 22nd. Where are you as to the condition that the city is in the aftermath of the tornado?
We were very fortunate in the hours immediately following. We had an incredible response, of course, from our first responders and our crews, but in addition, we had people from all the surrounding communities. We had law enforcement that were here. I don't know how they got to City Hall even before I did. It was incredible. They were there from Columbia and surrounding communities, and they had their officers ready to help. I mean, MoDOT had their snowplows out clearing the roads. Just every agency around was instantly put into action. So the immediate kind of cleanup and recovery, the power, you know, getting the power restored. We had people here just instantaneously to get the city back up and running, make sure everybody was safe, first of all. So the response was quick. This is what they're trained to do. It shows how important training is in our city budget when we think about training, and just the fact that they helped. And then we got into the phase where we had neighbors helping neighbors instantly. We had communities coming together, people from out of state that came to help. Strangers were helping others no matter what. And you know, when I look back, I think one of the best parts of it, and it's hard to think about what was best because it was such a hard situation, but that everything didn't matter other than helping people. That was the only thing that mattered. So political differences were aside. Nobody knew who cared about what politically. Nobody knew what their background was. It was just only about helping others. And you know, you were there, you were involved. A lot of the churches were. It was just incredible that people just literally dropped everything and helped to make sure everybody had food, clothing, the necessities taken care of. It was the most incredible response that I've ever seen.
Where were you when you first got the word that the tornado was on its way, and more than likely it was going to hit Jefferson City?
Well, we knew there was severe weather in the area, and in fact, that day we had just declared a flood emergency at City Hall. We had a special meeting, we had some emergency evacuation orders, so we felt like we were bracing for this flood, and we never expected that night that a tornado would come. And I had just gotten in bed, like many other people at that time of the night, thinking, you know, it was 11:30-ish, and I heard the sirens and thought, do I get up? And I will tell you that from now on, we will always heed warnings. And so then I turned on the TV. I saw Zach Paul. He did an incredible job. He was serious. He knew the tornado was on the ground. At that point, I was scared. I prayed. I called my mom and dad, made sure they were in the basement. We were checking on each other and neighbors. And when we realized it had hit, the first thing I did was just check on family. And then I checked on my brother and wasn't expecting on the other end of the line for him to get on and say his business had taken a direct hit and he was on his way. And just the frantic voices. And then I started getting phone calls instantly from others that were in that same situation. And found myself going to City Hall to see what was going on. We had an emergency operations center established. And within an hour of the tornado, I had news agencies nationally starting to call. And then when I didn't recognize those area codes, and I thought, what is going on? And then it hit me that people from all around the country were suddenly calling to say, what's going on in Jefferson City? What's happened? Are you all okay? What is going on? And it was very surreal, and I look back and I can almost see every minute from the time that I heard the sirens, just like we all can. I was very blessed that I'm okay and we're okay, but we knew a lot of people that weren't as fortunate when we look at the path. And I think the worst part was going to City Hall that night to the Emergency Operations Center at about 2 in the morning and saying, is everybody okay? I was afraid to ask because when you saw the devastation, you couldn't believe that people were able to survive and get out. And boy, out of everything, I'm just thankful that we did and that people heeded the warnings. How many people I talked to that said, you know what, I listened this time. I heard the sirens, or they heard the new, whatever news media they were listening to, whatever it was, on TV, online. Zach Paul was credited. There's a lot of news agencies that got the message out. People listened, and we are thankful to the good Lord that people heeded the warnings, and we know what happened next. But it was a very scary time throughout that night, and I will never forget the images that I saw, and cars upside down and sideways and houses with no roofs, and then watching the people walking around in the street around the power lines in total darkness as I was going around with some of the authorities and checking in on people and watching them do their job and seeing the devastation firsthand. So it's something we'll never forget, but we will always remember how fortunate that we all were to walk away from that and really then come together in the hours and days and months following.
Yeah. And, speaking of disasters, with the disaster recently in the Bahamas and in Carolina, it makes us now a little bit more reflective because we were close to that ourselves and we've been through it.
Absolutely. I'm saddened when I see those images on TV of what they're going through because it really does hit very close to our hearts and close to home because we know very similar what it feels like to see some of that devastation and be worried about our family and friends and neighbors and to live through that and just the total chaos that follows. And it's heartbreaking, and it really, we pray for the best for those that are going through it, and we've been fortunate we haven't had those kind of things happen here. And in a way, I guess the good part that's come out of it is that we are a changed community and that we realize what's important just in an instant, and we are not the same as we were before May 22nd. And I think that's okay, and that's a good thing, because maybe things that mattered to us then aren't as important now. Like you said, we can reflect on this differently than we did before. But going through it, and you see images on TV, but until you have it happen in your community to your neighbors, you can't really understand what it's like and to really value what's important in life. And praying for the best and being thankful to God that we're okay and still here to talk about it, and how fortunate we are, and just to have that level of being thankful. And what we appreciate, because cars and houses, I mean, those can all be replaced,
Yeah.
okay? That's, Mother Nature and the forces that we have in this world that we live with on a daily basis. I mean, what we really need is each other, and we get through it together, and that's why we're a strong community.
Yeah. After any disaster, the city have to deal with the aftermath of it. It costs money to clean up. It costs money to replace. So how did the tornado impact the budget?
It's something that is still impacting our budget, and we won't know for quite some time what the long-term impact will be. We do know that we had a lot of street signs, street lights, signals, things that had to be replaced, some of our buildings that had some damage. So there was also the trash and debris pickup and services that we offered that we normally don't. We had the compost site expanded so that people could either drop off their yard, some of the vegetation, or we offered the pickup as well. So those were a lot of extra services. Now in the future, some of those could be reimbursed by FEMA, and we anticipate a lot of things will be reimbursable. But even though things can be reimbursed, there's still a lot of upfront cost. There's the labor cost of a lot of employees that were out there extra hours, and just a lot of unanticipated expenses. But we have kind of what we call like a rainy day fund. We have the savings set aside just in case. That's why we have a 17% fund balance that we want to always keep, because you just never know, and council has been very good about that. Well, we will likely see us dipping into that. We are working towards a work session with City Council at the end of September to go over more numbers, because the numbers are still coming in, and it's hard to accurately reflect because it's still happening. We're still really in the heart of it. But yes, it affects the budget, and I would say we're prepared for it. We need to keep moving forward like we ask any business to do, and a lot of places were hit, households were hit, families were hit. We have to look at what the options are for individuals. A lot of times it could be insurance, and for the city it could be other assistance like FEMA, public assistance, and those kind of things that are available, and then we just have to work through it. But we just encourage people to keep going. You don't want to just completely stop and live in fear. You need to know that although things such as the budget, whether it's your family budget or whatever it may be, yes, it's affected by the tornado, but we've got to move forward.
You spoke about FEMA. How effective was working with FEMA and SEMA in the aftermath? How immediate were they on the ground?
They've been good to work with. They've provided a lot of information and have worked very closely with us. In fact, we have had frequent meetings with FEMA and SEMA, and for example, even the SEMA volunteer coordinators. So in the very beginning, when volunteer efforts were needed, we had SEMA on hand to offer their expertise. I mean, in a way, we were lucky because with the state headquarters in Jefferson City, there's a lot of SEMA offices for the state emergency management that were able to converge very quickly with our disaster, and a lot of those people, these are their neighborhoods as well. So in a way, we were fortunate to have that extra assistance immediately. And that's what they do every day. That's what they're very skilled in. And they were able to help us assemble volunteers and get that going. In addition to the FEMA and SEMA, there was also the immediate volunteer efforts. So the short-term recovery committee, which was a lot of the efforts led by the United Way of Central Missouri, of course, in coordination with the Red Cross and so many others that I won't even start to mention because I would leave them all off. But I mentioned the Red Cross because they offered the shelter for those that needed it immediately. But every organization, faith-based, churches, nonprofits, there were so many that came together as part of the short-term recovery to offer that assistance. We had the mark, the places that people could go, and if they had been affected, they could register for some of those resources that became available to them. And even to this day, there are some that may not want to utilize the resources, but I would encourage people to see what's available and take that help. And it was interesting, we just dedicated a Habitat for Humanity house, and the mother of the family that is so blessed and thankful to have the house. Their home was destroyed in the tornado. And she said her career, her job is helping others. So she does physical therapy and assists people. And she said the hardest part was receiving and being in the position, she's usually the one to give. And now she had to be the one to receive, and learning to receive for her and what that meant to her family. And there's so many people that think, others have it worse than they do. They don't want to ask for help. And we see that a lot in here, especially in Jefferson City, where people feel like they want to help others. I mean, people who lost their businesses, lost their churches, they were the ones out there helping others. And I thought, you're helping, you just lost your business, you just lost your home, their family. I mean, that's what was so incredible, was watching everybody come together, no matter what. But knowing that that assistance is there, and we want to make sure we help people.
Yeah. What's the status of finding individuals housing in the light of them not being housed one day without housing the next? What's the status of those individuals that are still out there? Is there any?
There is, and housing is definitely, between the short term and the long term, we're still working through that. In the short term, providing whether it was hotel vouchers or the very temporary housing for those that were immediately displaced, now finding the long-term housing solutions. In some areas that were hit, we have some owner-occupied, and so some of them are working through either the insurance and deciding, are they going to rebuild? Have they decided to move? Hopefully still in Jefferson City, maybe not. Some have left the area entirely. And then what do we do in some of those cases when people have maybe had a chance to either take their insurance proceeds and move on? Maybe they didn't have insurance. Then what are they doing? In some cases where they don't have that assistance to rebuild. Then we also have the cases of some of the rental properties. So we have the absentee landlords, or working with them, and how are they going to rebuild? We did have some multifamily housing. We had some apartments that were hit, and I know they're working through the rebuilding process. But being able to determine what people are intending to do, because a lot of that is private property. It's not city-owned property, so we don't have the control over it. And then we also have the balance of some neighbors are wanting to build, and maybe next door they still have a shell of a home, and then it's a very delicate balance, because we can't go in and enforce the code and say, hey, you all need to either tear this down or what needs to be done. I mean, we can, but we have to be very delicate about it, understanding the circumstances. But we also want to get the rebuilding process going. But housing is a huge concern, making sure we have adequate housing, affordable housing, and a lot of these neighborhoods were very established and had been for a long time, and so it's having a long-term effect on the neighborhoods, on several.
And unfortunately, the path that the tornado took, there was a lot of low income, a lot of rental housing, and I'm sure some of those landlords probably going to say, I don't want to go back into that business. And so what kind of plans does the city have relative to trying to address that issue, where landlords say, look, I had the property because that was my family home, but I'm not even in the city anymore. So,
right. And we're working through some of those scenarios, and I guess as many that want to walk away, I think we will have some that will want to step in. I've heard from some multifamily developers that make those developments that have said if there are opportunities, they want to build and they want to do that. So if some of these landlords are willing to sell, then I think there are others that want to step in and rebuild Jefferson City. But finding the right incentives, finding the right, and that's where there may be some assistance available, and finding all the tools, not just physical tools, but incentive tools that may be available in our case now that we've had this disaster, that could be available for rebuilding. So in a way, that might be good because they weren't available before.
Right.
So let's hope. I mean, we didn't want to be in this position, but we might have incentives available that could allow for some of these homes to be rebuilt.
Let's talk about the prison site. The city had worked very diligently with the state to acquire the property, and you were moving forward, and now what?
Yes, well, the prison took a direct hit. Some people may not realize there's 5 housing units, and about 3 of the 5 were really impacted. Of course, people might have seen the wall and part of the things that they could see from the road that were visibly, hit, but the buildings were too. And the most historic housing unit had a substantial portion of the roof that came off. So all the weather and elements have been coming in there. And it's unfortunate because the tours have stopped, and we are hoping to get the tours to resume this year. That's the hope. But there's a lot of the structural engineering and other factors that have to come into it. But now that it's been somewhat taken away from us, that those tours are gone, we suddenly realize the amount of busloads of people that were coming to Jefferson City for tourism. They would shop in our shops, they would eat in our restaurants, get gas in the gas stations, stay at the hotels. So that has a significant dollar amount, not just for the ticket sales for the tours, but the impact to our local businesses.
Right.
So we really want to get that back. I guess the good thing is it's made us see what an asset that is, because now we know what we're losing by not having it.
Right.
And immediately following, there were busloads of tours that came to Jefferson City, and they tried to find elsewhere to go. But I do believe, though, this opportunity, if we rebuild and still continue tours, that this is just another piece in the history of the historic penitentiary. And we'll look back on it, and the tornado is going to be a significant part of the tour now, in saying what happened. And so we want to keep that going. Now, the interesting thing with the prison is we're going through the selection process for a developer for the part that the city owns, which is adjacent to the historic buildings that the state owns. So we are working with the state and going through the selection process to select a developer. We have about 5 that have submitted, and then around December 1 is the deadline for them to submit their ideas for development to the city. And we've opened it up now to say, if you wanted to perhaps do something with one of those housing units or other areas that weren't initially included in the land conveyance, what would you do? So now we're talking private and public partnership. We're talking about private developers investing their dollars possibly in the renovation of the historic penitentiary, because we know that the cost would be very substantial, and it would be unlikely that the city and state would have those funds to put in it, even though it's an economic driver for our community and brings a lot of dollars in. If we could get a private investment in there, it would be a win-win for everybody. So that would be wonderful if that happened.
Well, talking economic development, the St. Mary's site is booming now. What's going on over there?
Yes, and that is going to be a hotel there eventually. And we know there's some retail that have been built on the site, and there's some other pads on the space for redevelopment as well, of some retail space or restaurant retail. So we're glad to see that development. You go right across the street to the JCD building, and that's a building that sat vacant for many years, and now we're seeing that become redeveloped into office and living space and restaurant and retail. The old shoe factory on Capitol Avenue near the prison, we're seeing that has a new owner. So, or I guess not new anymore, but there's an owner there that's looking to make that a fun factory. So you look at all this economic development, and I think another piece of that is the schools. And so we have the new Jefferson City High School, the new Capital City High School, and the renovations to Jefferson City High School. So we're seeing, and then not too far long ago, we had Helias with their new complex. And so we're starting to see a lot of growth in our school system, and I think that's also a big economic factor.
Yeah. What do you attribute the boom to as far as developing Jefferson City?
I think that we see the assets that we have in our community, and that we are, Jefferson City is a great place to do business too. And I think that we are very stable. Our economy in Jefferson City is somewhat stable too. We have a good and safe community, and people like to live here. A lot of us who have been here for many generations love it here, and people who are new to Jefferson City enjoy it. So it's a great community, but I think it's a place you can invest your dollars in a business, and you know that if you work hard and have the right mix, that you can be successful in the capital city. We also have a mix, not only of residents, but people who come to visit the Capitol. So we have a really good location being central and a good mix. So with our economy, I think we're very stable and strong, and I think that's why we're seeing people invest. And part of the investment too is that we have the assets, we have the sites that people are wanting to invest in. The prison's a good example. Our riverfront, getting that developed is a good example. We're a river city without access to the river. Well, we're getting ready to build, the Bicentennial Bridge, and pretty soon you'll be able to start at the Capitol and walk to the riverfront, or just have the view of it at least. So we utilize our assets here.
Thinking about where Jefferson City will go from here, what is the long-term plan for Jefferson City in your eyes?
If you would have asked me that on May 21st, I might have thought different than I do now after the tornado. And it is completely different. It's kind of, at first it was a scary thought of where is Jefferson City going to be. And the day after the tornado, walking around, I walked and looked and thought, what do we do? How are we going to come back? And after that, I started realizing that we are going to come back, and we're going to have the ribbon cuttings, and we're going to reopen things and businesses and places. We've already started to see that, but when you start to envision and really visualize the future and do whatever it takes to make it happen, you start to see where we're going to be. It's hard to come from the place that we have in the last few months after the tornado and see the destruction and wonder, what is it going to look like? How are we going to rebuild? How is this going to come together? But we have an opportunity in our hands to make it better than it was before, to make it, shape the future of our community. Not many communities have an opportunity to say, we are really looking to the future because we have to. We don't have a choice. This was given to us. We're going to make the best of it. And we can look ahead and someday say, that tornado was the best thing that happened to Jefferson City because look at what we were able to do. And we have to come from that place. We have to make it better because we kind of have a choice. We could, how are we going to go right now? Well, we need to go to a place that's stronger and better. And when we all work together, we can make that happen. And we're nowhere near that. I mean, this is long term, and I understand that. And we need to, as a community, understand it takes time. But we've got to have our vision on making this a better community, because the tornado is not going to define us in a way that it destroyed us. The tornado is going to define us in that we are stronger than we were before it and a better community.
Okay. Well, Mayor Tergin, thank you very much.
Thank you, WT.
The Lord did bless us in that it was not as bad as it could have been.
Absolutely.
And so we have a lot to be blessed for.
Yes, we do.
Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time. We have a lot of work to do here in Jefferson City. God bless. Thank you.